The air conditioning in the executive boardroom was calibrated to exactly 65 degrees, a temperature engineered by the building's architects to keep board members alert during long presentations. All it actually accomplished was making the 4 titanium surgical screws in my right knee throb with a dull, rhythmic ache. Shifting my weight in the heavy leather chair, I let my right shoulder drop just a fraction to ease the tension, watching the quiet execution happening at the opposite end of the long mahogany table. The metrics simply do not support your operational model, Miss Jones, the man in the charcoal suit said. His name was Marcus, a vice president for a regional sports conglomerate, and his voice carried the slick, frictionless cadence of a guy who had never taken a physical hit in his life. He slid a glossy, 50-page prospectus across the polished wood. Our bid for the Stadium Outreach Partnership guarantees a 20% increase in marketable youth data within the first fiscal quarter. Your nonprofit relies on volunteer hours and… What was the phrase used on page 4 of your brief? Community goodwill? That doesn't scale. 2 city council members were already nodding at his charts before Dior even had a chance to finish her second sentence. Her stapled, 10-page packet sat untouched in the center of the table, looking incredibly fragile next to the leather-bound corporate binders. Dior Jones sat with her spine perfectly straight. Her hands rested flat on the table on either side of her document. She wore a tailored navy blazer, the cuffs slightly frayed at the edges if you looked close enough, a detail that told me she spent her funding on the kids in her program, not on her wardrobe. She didn't flinch at Marcus's condescension. She simply stared at the glossy binder he had pushed toward her, then lifted her chin to meet his eyes. Community goodwill doesn't scale on a spreadsheet, Marcus, Dior said. Her tone remained completely level, though a tiny muscle worked in her jaw. It scales when a kid has a safe, lit field to go to after school instead of an empty, locked house. Your proposal monetizes the city's youth leagues, turning them into data points for your advertisers. Mine actually equips them to play the game. Marcus smiled, a thin, patronizing expression. A noble sentiment, but the municipal charter requires strict financial compliance. My legal team has already begun pulling records on partner agencies. We are evaluating escrow accounts, insurance margins, and liability risks. The city cannot afford a default. Marcus had glossy charts, 3 council nods, and the room's momentum on his side. Dior sat with 1 stapled packet and a deadline. He was loading a massive amount of corporate expectation onto a paper-thin community base. I'd seen offensive lines built exactly like that during my 10 years in the league. They always looked great on the playbook diagrams, and they always collapsed on the very first blitz. As the new majority owner of the franchise, the final endorsement of the partnership contract rested entirely on my desk. The expectation was that I would sit here, look intimidating for the local press, and rubber stamp whichever agency the city favored. Mr. Sanchez, Marcus said, turning his attention toward the head of the table, projecting his voice with practiced confidence. From a purely logistical standpoint, aligning your franchise with our corporate infrastructure is the only logical move. We have the capital to absorb any municipal audit requirements instantly. Leaning forward, I felt the heavy leather chair groan under my sudden shift in weight. I didn't bother looking at his binder. I looked directly at Dior. Her dark eyes met mine, steady and defiant. She was 37, a woman who had spent a decade building a program out of scrap and sheer willpower, and she was watching an ex-athlete 8 years her junior holding the pen that could dismiss it all. She fully expected me to side with the money. My heavy knuckles rapped once against the wood. The sharp sound cut through the hum of the ventilation system. I don't care about your infrastructure, Marcus, I stated. My voice was rougher than the room was used to, carrying the gravel of a cold locker room rather than the polished echo of a corporate suite. Your proposal is top-heavy. All marketing, no footing. You put a heavy load on glass ankles. The whole thing snaps under pressure. I don't back weak plays. Marcus's confident smile flattened into a thin, hard line. The councilman to his left slowly lowered his pen, suddenly looking unsure. Dior didn't speak, but her chin lifted half an inch, her eyes locking onto mine with a new, sharp focus. Shifting my gaze fully to her, I pointed at her document. Miss Jones, your equipment budget on page 3 is 20% lower than the baseline requirement for a league this size. Because I negotiated direct wholesale agreements with the equipment manufacturers, Dior answered instantly, not backing down a fraction of an inch. We don't need middlemen taking a percentage. We need the gear on the field, in the hands of the kids. I nodded slowly. That was a solid, weight-bearing strategy. No wasted motion. The board will reconvene in exactly 3 weeks, I announced, ignoring the council members' surprised looks. Miss Jones, you and I are going to tear down your logistics plan and rebuild it until it is completely bulletproof against any municipal audit. Marcus, you can take your binder back. Marcus's binder stayed open on the table, but no one reached for his transfer papers after that. The heir simply left his side of the room. 2 days later, the real mechanical work began. The franchise headquarters was a towering glass and steel monument to corporate sports, all sleek lines and digital displays. My office, however, was located in the back of the building, overlooking the practice facility. I had stripped out the modern art when I bought the team. The walls were covered in whiteboards and stadium blueprints. My desk was a massive slab of iron and reclaimed wood. Dior walked through my door right on time at 8 a.m. She carried a thick canvas tote bag that looked heavy enough to snap a lesser person's shoulder strap. Setting it on the floor with a muted thud, the sound heavy with dense paperwork, she took the seat across from me. I appreciate the delay you manufactured on Tuesday, Mr. Sanchez. Dior started immediately, pulling a massive stack of ledger printouts from her bag and setting them on the iron desk. But before we start, I need to be completely clear about my boundaries. My agency operates on strict financial independence. I will not accept a charity handout or a shadow donation from your franchise to inflate my bid. If the city council audits my accounts, they need to see clean, earned revenue. We win this contract on our own merit, or we don't win it at all. Watching the absolute steel in her spine, I respected the boundary. She wasn't looking for a billionaire savior to write a check. She was looking for a fair arena to fight in. First rule, I said, pulling a red dry erase marker from my top drawer. Call me Esteban. Mr. Sanchez was my father, and he laid brick in the summer heat for 40 years. Second rule, I don't do charity. I do tactical reinforcement. Your bid is good, but Marcus wasn't bluffing about his legal team pulling records. If there is a single blind spot in your liability coverage or your operating budget, they will exploit it and use it to disqualify you. Dior's eyes narrowed slightly, processing the tactical reality. He's looking for a procedural default. He's looking for a weakness in the line, I corrected, standing up. Walking over to the massive whiteboard taking up the east wall, I ignored the faint click in my knee. We have 3 weeks. We don't just patch the holes. We rewrite the entire playbook. Let's look at your transport routes. For the next 4 hours, we dismantled her operational budget line by agonizing line. It wasn't about abstract numbers on a page for me. It was about leverage and momentum. I mapped out her bus routes, showing her where her transport costs were carrying too much overhead and where her staffing metrics were vulnerable to sudden shifts if a volunteer didn't show up. Dior was sharp. She didn't passively accept my edits. She challenged them with field-tested logic. When I suggested cutting a community post-game meal program to afford a higher tier of commercial liability insurance, she flatly refused, tapping her pen sharply against the desk. That meal program stays? Dior stated, her voice hardening. For some of the kids in the South District, that post-game meal is the only hot dinner they are guaranteed all weekend. It is non-negotiable. Find another place in the ledger to cut. Pausing with the marker hovering over the board, I looked at the fierce, unyielding protection in her posture. I walked back to the desk, took the spreadsheet from her side, and pulled up the stadium's internal vendor contracts on my monitor. I cross-referenced the dates and the supply volumes. Fine, I said, writing a new equation on the legal pad between us. The stadium's primary concession suppliers have a surplus write-off clause for game days. Currently, thousands of pounds of high-grade prep food get dumped to claim the tax write-off. We redesign the logistics route. We redirect the game day surplus directly to your program's kitchens. It costs your agency $0, it maintains your meal program, and it actually lowers my franchise's waste disposal tax penalty. Dior blinked, the defensive tension leaving her shoulders for a fraction of a second. She leaned forward, studying the numbers I had just written down, her mind quickly verifying the math. That actually works. It solves the budget drain without cutting the service. Reaching blindly for her styrofoam coffee cup, she found it empty. She let out a small, frustrated sigh and pulled her hand back. I didn't say anything. Picking up my own mug, I walked over to the corner break station and poured 2 fresh cups of the terrible, industrial drip coffee the front office supplied in bulk. Walking back, I set the black mug down quietly next to her right hand. Drink, I instructed, taking my seat. Then we look at your equipment storage overhead, staring at the steaming mug for a long moment. A faint, unexpected softness crossed her features before she masked it with professional focus. She wrapped her hands around the warm styrofoam. Thank you. The first week bled into the second. The corporate office became our shared bunker. We established a relentless rhythm, working late into the evenings. Long after the marketing executives and PR teams had taken the elevators down to the parking garage. By the middle of the second week, Marcus tried a perimeter blitz. An email flagged with high priority hit my inbox just after 6 p.m. on a Thursday. It was from the city clerk's office, formally requesting preliminary financial disclosures from all bidding agencies, citing a sudden administrative review pushed by a coalition of council members. They're moving the goalposts, Dior said, reading the forwarded email on her screen. They want full municipal zoning compliance records for all our temporary field sites by Monday morning. That usually takes 30 days to process through the city planning office. Can you get it? I asked, watching her face. Dior didn't panic. Reaching into her tote bag, she pulled out a massive, color-coded binder. I used to work in the city planning office before I started the nonprofit. I know exactly which obscure district ordinances bypass the standard 30-day wait period if the land is classified as temporary recreational use. She flipped past dozens of tabs. I just need to cross-reference the specific parcels and draft the exemption letters tonight. She went to work, methodically dismantling the bureaucratic trap Marcus had set. I watched her draft the legal responses with complete fluency. She was a master of her own domain, fighting back with paperwork and intellect. It was Tuesday night of the third week, raining hard against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The temperature in the empty office building had dropped significantly as the central heating dialed back for the night, a damp chill seeping through the glass panes. Dior was intensely focused on a municipal liability code displayed on her laptop, her brow deeply furrowed. Sitting behind my own monitor, I observed her routine. I had learned her tells over the past 2 weeks. She had a habit of rubbing her left temple when the text got dense, a physical sign of eye strain. She had been staring at that screen for 3 hours straight, without a single break. Taking my phone out of my pocket, I placed it face down on the desk. I closed my laptop with a definitive click. Screen time is done for the night, I announced, the sound cutting through the quiet hum of the room. Dior didn't look up, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I just need to finish cross-referencing this final district ordinance. If Marcus's legal team challenges our field usage rights during the final vote, I need the exact citation memorized. The field isn't going anywhere tonight, Dior. Your eyes are tired, and your focus is dropping. Standing up, the grinding ache in my joints flared in the damp weather, but I kept my stride even. I walked over to the digital climate control panel on the wall and bumped the heat up 4 degrees. Picking up my heavy wool team jacket from the back of my chair, I walked over to her side of the desk. Without making a grand production out of it, I simply draped the heavy, fleece-lined jacket over the back of her chair. Dior finally stopped reading. She looked at the dark blue wool, then slowly tilted her head up to look at me. I'm perfectly fine, Esteban. You're shivering, I stated, dealing with the observable physical reality, not the polite fiction. Put it on, or I pull the plug on the router and we pack up right now. Hesitating, her eyes searched my face for any sign of a joke. Finding none, she sighed and slipped her arms into the sleeves. The jacket was massive on her, completely swallowing her tailored blouse, but her shoulders physically dropped as the insulated warmth hit her. The ambient scent of the room rain against glass, old paper, and the faint smell of whiteboard marker felt suddenly localized, anchored around the small space we shared at the desk. You're a dictator when you want to be, you know that? She murmured, pulling the heavy wool collar up slightly against her neck. I'm a pragmatist, I countered, walking back to my side and sitting down. I didn't reach for my phone or open my laptop, giving her my complete, undivided attention. I rested my forearms on the desk. You're running yourself into the ground. Why do you push this hard? I know you care about the kids, but this is something else. Looking down at the dark screen of her laptop, she traced the edge of the trackpad with her fingernail. The kids are the mission. Yes. But also, she paused, the quiet of the rainy night pulling the truth to the surface. I'm 37, Esteban. In the nonprofit sector, you reach a certain age where corporate boards stop seeing you as a passionate innovator and start seeing you as a placeholder. Marcus looks at me and sees someone who is financially outgunned. He sees a soft target. Offering a dry, completely humorless smile, she looked up. I don't have corporate backing. I don't have a massive legal team. I just have my reputation and my outcomes. If I lose this stadium contract to a conglomerate, the donors will follow the shiny new object. My agency closes its doors by December. My jaw tightened instinctively. I recognized that specific, hollow kind of exhaustion. It was the exact same burnout I felt during my last year in the league, knowing my knee was rapidly failing, knowing the front office was already scouting my 20-year-old, fully intact replacement, the feeling of being evaluated solely on your remaining utility. You aren't outgunned, I said, my voice low and incredibly steady, carrying absolute certainty across the desk. You're the only person in this whole damn city who actually knows how to run the plays that matter? Dior's breath caught slightly in the quiet room. We sat there, the sound of the rain hitting the glass, the only noise in the building. Keeping my hands resting flat on the desk, I wanted to reach out, to trace the line of her jaw, but I kept my hands perfectly still. I didn't cross the physical space between us. I just let the truth of the statement sit there until she accepted it. The real pressure arrived exactly 3 days before the board's final vote. I was in the middle of a tense phone call with my general manager about the upcoming draft when Dior walked into my office. Her face was completely pale, her usual composed, straight-spined posture rigid with panic. She held a single piece of official, watermarked municipal letterhead. Hanging up the phone immediately, I cut the GM off mid-sentence. What broke? Clause 4B, Dior said, her voice tight, struggling to maintain a professional cadence. Walking to the desk, she placed the paper flat on the iron surface. Marcus's legal team didn't just look for gaps, they threw a flag on the whole play. They submitted a formal municipal inquiry this morning regarding the city charter for stadium partnerships. There is a deeply buried activation clause. If a private agency is handling more than $500,000 in municipal facility access, they must prove a liquid cash reserve of $50,000 in a certified bank escrow account by the time the contract is signed. Picking up the paper, I read the text fast. The legal jargon was incredibly dense, cross-referencing 3 different tax codes, but the mechanics were brutally simple. It was a procedural trap designed to crush a smaller entity. They triggered the audit publicly, Dior continued, pacing a short, frantic line across my carpet. It was filed into the public city record at 9 a.m. If I don't submit a bank-certified statement proving I have $50,000 in an escrow account by Friday morning's final vote, my agency is procedurally disqualified. Marcus wins by default, without a single vote being cast. Scanning the document for leverage points, loopholes, or appeal timelines, I found none. How much liquid reserve do you have in the agency account right now? Dior stopped pacing. She looked at the floor, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. $12,000. Every other dollar that comes in goes straight into the field programs, the insurance, the transport. I don't hoard cash. I deploy it. Letting out a harsh, defeated breath, the sound scraped against the quiet of the room. It's over. Esteban, I cannot legally raise $38,000 in 48 hours. Marcus knew exactly what my operating margins were. He waited until the final hour to spring the trap so I couldn't launch an emergency fundraiser. Sit down, I instructed. Esteban, there's no whiteboard fix for this. It's a hard, regulatory cash wall. I said, sit down, Dior. My tone wasn't a request. It was a heavy, grounded anchor in the middle of a storm. Dior slowly lowered herself into the chair opposite me. I could see the panic vibrating just under her skin. She was bracing herself, waiting for me to deliver the final, logical blow to tell her it was a good run. But the math simply didn't work out, and the franchise couldn't risk backing a disqualified bid. Instead, pulling my keyboard toward me, I opened the franchise's internal HR and procurement portal. 3 months ago, I said, my voice calm and methodical, the stadium board approved an open RFQ request for qualifications for an independent community integration liaison. The role is designed to audit the stadium's impact on local neighborhoods. The approved annual budget for that contract is $60,000. Dior frowned, her panic halting as confusion set in. I know about that RFQ. I ignored it. I run a nonprofit. I'm not a corporate consultant. The role has been sitting empty because every applicant has been a corporate suit who doesn't know the first thing about this city's neighborhoods, I countered, turning my monitor so she could see the open procurement file. I need that role filled by someone who actually knows the grid. Shaking her head instantly, her boundaries flared up. No. I told you on day 1. Esteban. No shadow donations. If you use your authority as the owner to unilaterally hand me a consulting contract right now just to artificially inflate my bank account, Marcus will scream quid pro quo. The City Ethics Council will flag it, invalidate my bid anyway, and drag your franchise into a scandal. I agree, I said plainly, which is why I am not unilaterally handing you anything. I am telling you the RFQ is open. You have to earn it, and it has to be entirely fireproof. Picking up my desk phone, I hit a speed dial button. Sarah? I need you in my office right now. Bring the procurement guidelines. Dior watched me, wary. Who is Sarah? Sarah Vance is the franchise's independent compliance director. She doesn't report to me. She reports directly to the League Oversight Committee to prevent exactly the kind of quid pro quo Marcus would accuse us of. A moment later, Sarah, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s carrying a thick tablet, walked into the room. Sarah, I said, pointing to the screen. The Community Integration Liaison RFQ. If an agency submits a comprehensive scope of work tonight, what is the expedited timeline for compliance review and standard mobilization payment? Sarah adjusted her glasses, looking at Dior, then at the screen. If the scope of work provides clear, fair market value to the stadium, I can review and certify it by noon tomorrow. Once compliance clears it, our standard procurement policy allows for an 80% mobilization advance upon signing. Finance can release the wire, and it would post to the vendor's bank by Thursday afternoon. Sarah looked directly at me. But the proposal has to be bulletproof, Esteban. I will not approve a favor. I don't want a favor, Dior interjected, her voice suddenly finding its footing. Sitting up straighter, she looked at Sarah. If I draft a scope of work detailing a comprehensive neighborhood impact study, including traffic mitigation, noise complaint reduction strategies, and local vendor integration for game days, can you evaluate it strictly on merit by tomorrow morning? Sarah smiled, a genuine, professional expression. If it hits all the municipal metrics, Miss Jones, I will stamp it approved myself. Then I need to call the municipal bank manager right now, Dior said, already calculating the timeline. I have to lock in a certification appointment for Thursday at 4 p.m. to ensure the escrow documentation is physically stamped before the Friday 8 a.m. city clerk cutoff. Do it, I said. Sarah left the room, leaving the procurement packet on the desk. I looked at Dior, noticing the tension still coiled in her shoulders. Do you need another cup of the battery acid before we start? Dior grimaced, a brief flash of dry humor breaking through the stress. I'd rather drink the rainwater off the window. But pour it anyway. We have a long night. We worked through the night. I provided the raw stadium data. Dior engineered the solutions. She didn't just draft a filler document. She built a comprehensive community integration manual that the franchise actually desperately needed. At 7 a.m., she hit send on the email to Sarah Vance. At 11:30 a.m., Sarah walked back into the office and dropped the printed proposal on my desk. It had a heavy, green APPR, fair market value stamp on the front page. It's brilliant, Sarah said to Dior. Finance is processing the vendor agreement now, according to standard policy. You can sign it at the front desk. The mobilization wire will be released at 2 p.m. Standing up, her hands trembling slightly, not from panic, but from exhaustion and sheer relief. Dior looked at me. I need to get to the bank to secure that escrow certification slot. Go, I said, keeping my tone strictly professional. I'll see you in the boardroom on Friday morning. Friday morning arrived with a cold, gray sky pressing against the city skyline. The boardroom was packed. Marcus sat at his end of the long mahogany table, flanked by two lawyers, looking incredibly smug. The three city council members had their pens ready, thick stacks of transfer paperwork sitting in front of them. Dior walked in right at 9 o'clock, wearing the same navy blazer. Today she looked completely different. She looked entirely rooted to the ground, immovable. Taking her seat, she placed a single, slim manila folder on the table in front of her. Walking in a moment later, I took my seat at the head of the table. Let's make this efficient, Marcus announced, opening his glossy binder. As per Clause 4B of the Municipal Charter, triggered by our formal inquiry, Miss Jones's agency was required to provide proof of a $50,000 liquid escrow. As we all know, her operating margins cannot support that requirement. Therefore, her bid is formally disqualified due to procedural default. I have the stadium partnership transfer paperwork ready for the council's signatures. He pushed a stack of papers toward the center of the table with a confident slide. Keeping my eyes locked on Dior, I ignored the council members. She gave me a single-minute nod. "Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through the smugness in the room like a heavy steel blade. "Before the council signs anything, I highly suggest you review the addendum, Miss. Jones filed with the city clerk at 8 o'clock this morning." Marcus frowned, his lawyers exchanging confused, rapid glances. Sliding her slim manila folder across the table, Dior stopped it exactly in front of Marcus's hands. "Bank-certified proof of escrow," Dior stated, her voice clear, calm, and carrying effortlessly to the back of the room. $52,000 in liquid operational reserve, cleared and verified by the municipal bank yesterday afternoon. Marcus ripped the folder open. His face lost a fraction of its color as he read the bank's seal. "This is impossible. Where did this sudden capital injection come from? If this is a personal, undocumented loan from Mr. Sanchez, it is a direct violation of municipal ethics codes. It is earned, audited operational income," I interrupted. Raising my volume wasn't necessary to command the space. "Miss Jones's agency submitted a winning bid for the stadium's Open Community Integration RFQ. The contract was independently evaluated and approved by the franchise's compliance director. Her resulting operational income meets all municipal escrow requirements legally and transparently." Marcus stood up, his composure finally cracking, his voice rising in pitch. "This is a manipulation of the charter. You're altering the financial landscape to favor an obsolete charity." Letting the silence hang for 3 long seconds so everyone in the room could hear exactly how frantic and hollow he sounded, I remained seated. "I'm securing a stable investment," I said, my tone absolutely level. Shifting my focus to the 3 council members, I addressed the reality. "Let's talk about the playbook," since Marcus brought up the charter. Marcus's plan extracts data from our youth leagues and funnels the profit back into his regional office. In 3 years, the equipment will degrade, the volunteer base will quit, and the program will collapse because it has no local roots. It's a bad game plan. Turning my heavy gaze back to Marcus, I continued. "Miss Jones's plan uses stadium waste to fund local meals. She has direct line equipment sourcing. She has a 10-year track record of concrete, verifiable results. And now, she is the official community integration liaison for this franchise. I don't deal in corporate hypotheticals, I deal in what works on the field." Looking back at the council, I delivered the final call. "The franchise backs Dior Jones's bid, unconditionally. If you award the stadium partnership to Marcus's conglomerate, the stadium withdraws its funding entirely, and you can explain the loss of revenue to the mayor." Marcus's binder stayed open, but no one reached for his transfer papers after that. The head of the city council cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses nervously. Looking at Marcus's pale face, then at Dior's calm posture, and finally at me, he made the call. "The city's primary concern is long-term stability. Given the new, compliance-approved consulting partnership and the verified bank escrow, Miss Jones's bid not only meets the charter requirements but exceeds them with the franchise's direct, documented backing." He clicked his pen open. "The partnership contract is awarded to Miss Jones." Marcus didn't say another word. Snapping his binder shut, the sharp sound echoing in the large room, he walked out. His lawyers trailed silently behind him. The meeting adjourned quickly after the signatures were collected. The council members shook hands, offered polite, slightly intimidated congratulations to Dior, and filed out of the double doors. Soon, it was just Dior and me in the large, quiet boardroom. The ambient hum of the AC kicked on. My right knee registered the familiar, dull throb from the 65-degree air, but for the first time in weeks, the tight pressure in my chest was completely gone. Dior stood at her side of the long table, her hands resting lightly on the wood. Looking down at the signed municipal partnership contract, she traced the ink of her own signature. Then, exhaling a long, shaky breath, her shoulders dropped an inch as the massive pressure of the last 6 weeks finally lifted. She uncrossed her arms and took a slow, deliberate step toward my side of the table. "The compliance review?" Dior said softly, looking up at me. "You knew Sarah Vance would hold me to the fire. You made me earn the exact money I needed to beat him. I knew you could run the plays better than anyone else in the city," I replied, standing my ground as she approached. "I just gave you the field so Marcus couldn't run you out of bounds." She stopped 1 arm's length away. She didn't look for the door, the signed council papers, or her phone. She just looked at me, the tension finally bleeding out of her shoulders. She looked at my heavy frame, then at the lines of exhaustion around my eyes. We start the stadium integration rollout on Monday. The traffic mitigation report is the first deliverable, Dior said, her voice dropping to a quieter, more intimate register. I need to establish a weekly reporting cadence with you. Tuesdays at 8 a.m. In your office? It was a boundary and an invitation, wrapped into a single operational plan. Tuesday at 8 works, I confirmed, my voice steady. But I have a new term for the ongoing arrangement. Tilting her head, a faint spark of amusement lit her dark eyes. You want to amend the logistics already, Esteban? The coffee in my office is a workplace hazard, I said flatly. If we are going to meet every Tuesday morning to plan the youth league schedules, you are in charge of bringing coffee that doesn't taste like battery acid. I will reimburse the expense. A genuine, unguarded laugh broke from her chest, the sound echoing warmly in the cold boardroom. It was the first time I had heard her truly laugh. I accept those terms, but I'm keeping the oversized wool jacket you left on my chair on Tuesday. Consider it a permanent consulting perk. The room was still 65 degrees. My knee still carried a dull throb, but as she smiled, pulling the oversized wool collar closer around her neck and picking up her manila folder with her free hand, the massive, empty boardroom finally felt like the right kind of quiet. Keep the jacket, Dior, I said quietly, holding the door open for her. I'll see you on Tuesday. I learned that you don't have to fight every battle alone when you find someone who respects your playbook. A real partner doesn't try to buy your victory. They secure the field so you can win it yourself. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.